Now that you've chosen the topic, you need to decide what about that topic do you want to share? What is it about that topic that you want to zero in on? At this point, your topic is almost certainly too broad for a single speech. It's just a broad topic. It's time to narrow your focus. What specifically is your goal with this speech? Do you want to inform your audience? Do you want to persuade them? Are you out to challenge them? Are you celebrating some kind of special occasion? What's your goal? Once you begin to think about your goal, you need to write it down. Express your goal in a single sentence. That sentence is your purpose statement. Make sure it is specific. You don't want your purpose statement to be anywhere near as broad as your topic was. Once you have a purpose statement, then you should compose a thesis statement. Now, this is a little more in depth than your purpose statement. In a thesis, you express the central idea of your speech along with a roadmap for building the speech in a single sentence. If you need more than one sentence, you need to narrow it down. In a single sentence, you should be able to express what you plan to do and how you plan to do it. Once you've done that, then you need to identify your speech's main points. If you correctly completed the first two steps, this one's easy because your main points come from the roadmap that you constructed in your thesis. Most speeches contain 2 or maybe 3 main points. A good rule of thumb is 2 of everything. 2 main points, 2 subpoints. That helps you format your speech in a way that is easy for you to accomplish. Remember this, every main point has to support the thesis. The thesis is central. Everything points back to the thesis. So if you have a thesis statement and your first main point is subordinate to your thesis statement, your second main point is on the same level. It's of the same importance as your first main point, but it too is subordinate to the thesis statement. Your second main point doesn't point back to your first main point. Your second main point points back to the thesis. And that way your first main point and your second main point are coordinated together to reinforce your thesis. You probably will have a third main point. That's a very common speech layout is, one idea and 3 points. If that's the way you approach it, then your third point is also subordinate to your thesis. It points back to your thesis, and it's on the same level as your other 2 main points. Once you've determined what your main points are, then you need to research and select materials to support your main points. At this stage, you can use personal experience, examples, illustrations, definitions, expert testimony, statistics, analogies. You get the drift. Whatever information you can gather to support your points. But remember this, any fact claim you make needs to be backed up with a reference. That adds credibility to your speech. The next thing you do is outline your speech. You've already turned in your outline for this speech, but you may not have included as much information this time as you will next time. There is a sample speech outline in your book. Use that model for your next speech outline and the ones that follow it. That kind of gives you an idea of what you should see, what I should see when I look at your speech outline. Every speech is divided into 3 parts. There's an intro, a body, and a conclusion. And believe it or not, you prepare the body first, not the intro, and certainly not the conclusion. The body of the speech is where you elaborate on your main points. That's where you add some subpoints and you relate to your main points. So those subpoints are just like the main points are subordinate to the thesis. These subpoints are subordinate to the main points. Where the main point points back to the thesis, the subpoint points back to the main point. And each of those main points should have several subpoints under them. If you're using the 2 method that I was talking about earlier, you had 2 main points and you had 2 subpoints. And the order is the where the subpoints are secondary to the main points and support the main points, and the main point supports the thesis. That's called subordination. The other thing I talked to you about, where every main point should be equal, they're on the same level, and the subpoints are inferior to the main points. They're on a different level, a lower level. That's called coordination. And when you get everything working together and everything pulling together, it makes your speech, the structure of your speech, easier to follow and easier to listen to and more memorable. You're going to get your point across better if you use a structured approach. Once the body is finished, then you prepare the introduction. And your introduction should accomplish several things. First of all, it should orient your audience to the topic. Secondly, it should get your audience's attention and pique their interest. Third, it should state your thesis. You always state your thesis during your introduction. And then finally, it should give a preview of your main points. Kind of tell where you're going with the speech. After you develop your introduction, then you develop your conclusion. And the main goal of the conclusion is to restate your thesis in a way that your audience will remember it. You've stated your thesis, you've given the evidence to support your thesis, you've worked through your main points and subpoints, and you've laid out all of that for the audience. Now it's time to tie it all back together and restate the thesis in a way that will be memorable to your audience. Now, once that outline is complete, then it's time to create transitions. Transitions are well-crafted sentences that help you move from one point to the next, or from one part of the speech to the next part of the speech. And when you're thinking about transitions, you might want to think about signposts. Signposts are words that let your audience know where they are and where you're going. For instance, if you have 3 main points, you introduce those 3 main points in your thesis, you give a preview of them in your introduction, and then whenever you begin to lay them out, you say words like first, next, finally. Those are signposts. Your audience knows going in, there are 3 points. They know this is the first one. Then when you say next, they know they're on the second one. And when you say finally, it's like the preacher saying, I'm coming to a close. They know you're getting to the end, unless you're certain preachers. Sixth, consider using presentation aids to enhance your speech. Any kind of visual aid or audio aid can help your audience remember your speech. It can help them pay attention to your speech. It can help you get your point across. You might want to use things like objects, or drawings, or charts, or graphs, or photographs, or even recordings of sounds. All of those things are presentation aids, and any of them can be used to enhance your speech. The main goal there is to help your audience to remember your thesis, your points, your conclusion, what it is that you want them to take away from the speech.